automated process approved, because we have these things called ISO accreditations, which forest research has. So it needs to also meet the standards of the thing that it is replacing. Yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant. Fantastic talk. Thank you. Okay, next up we have David.
Hey. So we've got a bit of a change from the cameras, although some of the principles are still the same. My work has been on the audio side of things, so working on sounds, primarily on Orthoptera, but we're hoping to expand that a bit, as you'll soon see. Okay. So passive acoustic monitoring has been used for some years now. It's essentially, as the name suggests, monitoring animals through the sounds they make. The classic examples are actually birds and bats, birds having their characteristic songs, and bats making species-ish specific echolocation noises. I don't know how many of you have worked with bat echolocation, but you probably know it's not quite that simple. The main problems and the reasons why it didn't expand to insects immediately was partly due to the costs involved and the lack of knowledge. For example, until a few years ago, the acoustic recorders could cost upwards of €1,000 a piece. And there just weren't any or weren't enough insect acoustics specialists. Fortunately, time has marched on and that has changed. Another thing that's changed has been the interest. I think we've all noticed that people are starting to appreciate insects a little bit more. And it's not just the bird and bat people who get all the love. They just get most of the love. Okay, so the initial research had 3 goals. To build an AI classifier to help manage the mountains of data we get from passive acoustic monitoring. In this research, I generated 5.5 terabytes of data, 2.5 million files, which would not have been possible to inspect manually, no matter what supervisors might say on the subject. One does need to sleep eventually. I also tested whether a traditional €1,000 bat logger unit had the same performance as an inexpensive Audiomoth unit, this little guy just here, who costs a mere €80, 95 per unit when you factor in customs. I also tested whether adding additional devices could increase the species richness detected. So was 1 unit enough, or did I need 2 or 3? Because that's kind of important to know. Now, here comes the first of many caveats, in that the research was conducted in Schleswig-Holstein, northern Germany. So just a whisker south of where our friends in Aarhus, Denmark, are based. So it's Northern Europe and quite poor for Orthoptera species richness. If this were south of the Alps in Italy or even here in Serbia during the summer, things would have gotten a lot more complicated. I deployed in a range of landscape contexts. So that was based on remote sensing of habitat fragmentation, which is a whole other story. Hopefully you can see we had some areas which were agricultural, pesticide blasted, insect hellscapes, and others which were actually quite nice. At each of those sites between July and September of 2022, the hottest year Germany had ever had, up to 40 degrees at one point, I deployed an Audiomoth. At 8 of those sites, I deployed an additional 2 Audiomoths and 2 Elecon 4 bat loggers. Then, because we didn't get all the species we wanted, and because we wanted more training data for classifiers, we did additional targeted field visits the next year to 7 sites where Orthoptera richness was known from years of traditional monitoring. This included some protected and locally endangered species. I then took all of the confirmed recordings from this monitoring, along with all of the recordings that were available from databases such as Xenocanto and Orthoptera species file, along with labeled recordings kindly donated by experts such as Klaus Rieder, and manually labeled them in Raven Light software. Those of you who are attending my next session this afternoon will be intimately familiar with this software. Now, I'm not a computer scientist, so I use an off-the-shelf package called Open Soundscape in Python to build a convolutional neural network classifier. Please keep computer science questions to a minimum. I'm barely competent. Insects, yes. Code, please no. Have mercy on my soul. So, to give you a break from my voice, what does any of this actually mean in practice? Well, here is a recording from one of my favorite field sites. This is just an Audiomoth placed in the middle of a wildflower strip. Please work. Thank you for nothing. Suffice it to say, there's 4 species singing. That is an excellent question. Can I see if the sound is on? It looks to be on.
It looks like it's on.
It is on. Maybe. Actually, I was going to reuse this example during the workshop this afternoon. So if you want to, if you could wait an hour, you'll hear it then. It's quite a beautiful recording.
Wait, let's try this. Can you hear it?
Thank you so much. Okay. Well, I can indeed. Ooh. Ah. I actually have a Bluetooth speaker in my backpack, which I should have set up next time. But the main thing is, we actually had 4 species singing on this one file. 9 minutes, I've got 3 minutes. Tetragonia cantans. At the start, this little jerk will be familiar to anyone who's done bat work. It's Spolodoptera griseoptera. It has a stalker-like obsession with microphones. It will sit next to it. And while you're looking at a placotus or something with the volume turned all the way up, it will do that 3-note shrill of death and pop your eardrum. More importantly, we had Cortipus dorsatus, which is locally endangered, and we had no idea it was there until we heard it on the microphones. No, you're not. Okay, so the annotation process to feed all this into Open Soundscape and build the AI was to draw bounding boxes around each sound event and give it a label. You will notice I used short forms. Large parts of this were labeled during my PhD. And if you're at 2 a.m. working on 6 cans of Red Bull, you don't want to be typing out Pseudocortipus parallelus every single time, because you will get the number of L's wrong. There's more than you think. And basically, I did that for 15,000 files. One thing I should have mentioned earlier was I compared the Audiomoths with a traditional method, and they detected all but one species that were detected by netting, and all but one species that were known to be there from years and years of traditional monitoring. That was Myrmeliotetix maculatus. Now, the Audiomoths probably would have detected that species if I'd deployed them a month earlier, because this little guy stopped singing in Schleswig-Holstein in mid to late June at the latest. So that was my bad, not the Audiomoth's bad. Compared to standard netting, Audiomoth also got a few more species. Thank you so much. Species such as Tetagonia viridissima. It's that one that sings constantly at night wherever you go and sounds weirdly like a machine gun or a bicycle chain. You'll hear it this afternoon. Adding extra units did not make any difference. But please remember, Schleswig-Holstein is very species poor, and this was the hottest year for 200 years, which is perfect for grasshoppers to sing. Not so good for everything else. However, there were some advantages, like for high frequency species, like this Conocephalus dorsalis. Having more units meant I could get a better recording for them. The classifier performed well with 17 species in the initial version and a true positive value just over 80%. Overall, there was a lot of variability. The aforementioned stalker jerk had over 90% accuracy, whereas this little guy scraped 80% accuracy, like just barely good enough to be included. And even years later, it still remains my nemesis, simply because its song is this clip here. So add in any background noise and you have issues. Since then, I've doubled the number of species to 34, with another 12 in various stages of development. So those 12 extra are in there. They're just very bad and aren't ready for public consumption yet. It's also being used not just in Kiel anymore, but we've got collaborators using it in various parts of Europe, mostly Germany, but also a new friend in Croatia, southern Spain, Latvia, and England. We also plan at some point to try adding new insect species groups, such as bees, my beloved hoverflies, maybe, and moths as well. That's an emerging field, but some moths are known to make species-specific ultrasonic jamming noises while they fly to throw off bat predators. but that's very, very early days yet, and I need someone to victimize to give me training data and who actually knows what they're doing with moths. That there is a QR code to the published article, which only talked about the original 17, not the current 34. And this QR code contains the models and instructions on how to use them and install them. I also plan to make a fancy web app at some point, but that would involve raising my computer science skills to an acceptable level. Thank you very much for listening. Do you have any questions?
Well done. It's really fascinating stuff. Yes,
Thank you. Great presentation, really. Thank you very much. I have actually two questions. Can you, during your recording, can you extract some abundant specific information, and can you you can counter some intra-thesis variability?
To answer your first question, that's a bit of a hot topic in acoustics right now. There's a lot of debate. I'm actually going to be testing that with this chap in Osnabrück. My first instinct, though, is no, because we don't really know how many are singing simultaneously. And especially for grasshoppers, you will have some where the minute it's warm enough until the minute it gets too cold, they will not shut up. He will sing constantly, like a really, really obnoxious extrovert. And we don't know if that's lots and lots of individuals singing a little bit, or one individual grasshopper who's just spreading the joy.
Your device will guess they're overlapping, seeing together, kind of more fitted, the more specimen.
What we're trying to do with Osnabrück is we'll deploy several devices and then try to triangulate using the time delay where the individuals are singing. And once we know where the sounds are coming from, if we're getting several source points, we'll know how many individuals are singing. That's the idea. I'm skeptical as to whether or not we're actually going to succeed, or whether we'll be publishing a "we failed" manuscript.
And variability of signal within the species.
Yes, that is very true. There's some variability between individuals and more between temperature. So the hotter it gets, the more intense the song, and generally the higher the frequency. So some of them even go ultrasonic when it gets hot enough. There's also some geographic variation. For example, a Cortypus mollis from Germany will sound slightly different to the Cortypus mollis you get in Italy or Croatia or Serbia. It's still recognizably mollis, it just sounds slightly different. It doesn't help that grasshoppers like to hybridize, like to a kind of weird extent, which makes things funky.
But specific ceramic design can sort out the problem.
Yes, it can sort out that problem, especially combined with a local orthopterist. The open question really is your abundance question, where we don't know yet.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll do one more.